So I'm here in the State of Charge garage with a box on my table that includes a charger. That means it's review time here at State of Charge. And this time it's a charger from a company I've never reviewed before. The name of this company is called MicroStar International, or MSI for short. And while they're new to the EV charger industry, they actually already have a full line of EV chargers, including wall-mounted chargers and portable chargers. We're going to be reviewing their top-of-the-line wall-mounted charger called the EV Premium. This is actually a 60-amp charger, which can deliver up to 14.4 kilowatts to the electric vehicle, which is unusual. There aren't very many 60-amp chargers available today. We'll talk about the potential advantages of having this a little bit later in the review. But for now, let's start things off with the unboxing. Let's get into it. All right, let's take a look at what we have. First up, the unit itself. I will say it's a very elegant design. Looks great, and it's heavy. Now, heavy doesn't always mean quality, but it's a good indication that the outer casing is very strong and durable. I mean, this thing feels like I could run over it with my truck and it wouldn't break. So that's number one, starting off on a good foot for the unit itself. Cable-wise, it has a cable that's just slightly less than 25 feet. But I will say, this thing is a monster. It's the thickest cable that I've ever reviewed on a charger here. I just measured it. It's 23.3 millimeters thick, and it is heavy. Now, I know a lot of people might say, well, that's great. You got a super quality cable here. You can run over with your car. You could, almost abuse it, and it'll be fine. In my experience, that's not necessarily the case. Even the thinner cables are fine if you run over them with your car. They don't damage them. The problem with these really thick, heavy cables is they become a bear to use, to drag back and forth from the car. This thing is heavy. And I know this is a 60 amp charger, so people might also think, well, it's higher amperage, so it needs a thicker cable. It's not the case. This is an 80 amp charger here, and this cable's only 20 millimeters thick. This is a 48 amp charger here, and this is like 14 millimeters thick. So this is an extraordinarily thick cable, as I mentioned. The thickest cable I've ever reviewed here. And I have well over 100 chargers in the garage here. To me, that's a negative. We'll also see how it performs in the cold weather testing. Once I deep freeze this, the thicker cables typically don't perform as well as the thinner cables, because even if they're frozen, the thinner cables, you can still kind of manhandle them. Big, thick cables like this with really thick jackets can become a bear to deal with in the winter if you live in a northern state and you charge your vehicle outside, which will happen in many cases. Okay, so that's the unit itself. It also has a side connector holster, which is unusual. Not many EV chargers do this. Now, I know Tesla famously does here with their wall connector, and a couple other units that I've reviewed also do, but almost never is the connector holster on the side. And this also has an emergency stop button. A few of the chargers that I've reviewed have that, but again, not many. The connector seems like a pretty decent connector too. It has what I believe is a metal locking pin on the top here. It feels nice and strong. No rubberized grip, which I like to have, but it also feels a little bit thicker than the average connector. So this actually feels good in my hand. I like this connector, nice connector. Okay, we also have two RFID cards for remote access. We've got the warranty card. We have the quick guide, installation and owner's manual sort of. We've got two sets of screws here. These are larger screws. These are for the mounting brackets. And these tiny little screws here are for the front cover, which we're going to get into when we do the installation. They're not all attached because, strangely, I've actually have to open up this unit just to install it on the wall. That's very rare, but we'll do that later. And these are 4 mounting bolts with concrete anchors and washers if you need the concrete anchors. Otherwise, you can just use the bolts if you're mounting it in drywall or on a stud. 2 mounting brackets, which again, slightly unusual. You've got to mount 2 separate brackets on the wall to mount this. I don't remember if I've ever had to do that. I don't believe that's ever been the case. It's usually 1 mounting bracket. And then also here we have the wall mounting template for the 2 brackets. Okay, that's all that comes in the box. Next up, we're going to do the installation process. But before we do that, let's take a look at the MSI EV Premium's key features. The 60 amp hardwired version that we'll be reviewing here today costs $649.99. There is also a 40 amp plug-in unit that comes with a NEMA 1450 plug. That costs $50 more, $699.99. But I will point out, when I began this review, these units were on sale, and you could get the 60 amp hardwired unit for $489.99. And the 40 amp plug-in unit was $499.99. But currently, that discounted price is no longer available. The dimensions are 14 inches by 9 inches by 5 inches. This is a 60 amp unit that can deliver 14 kilowatt to your electric vehicle. It has adjustable power output from 6 amps up to 60 amps. That's done in the app. It has a 24.6 foot cable. It's available with either the J1772 connector or the NAX connector. It has a 7-inch bright display screen. It has RFID access, and 2 cards come with the unit. It has an IP55 enclosure rating, which is very good. That's equivalent to a NEMA 4X rating. The operating temperature is -40 degrees Fahrenheit to 131 degrees Fahrenheit. It is a Wi-Fi connected smart charger that comes with an app. It is also OCPP compliant, and you can direct the unit to third-party apps. You don't have to use the MSI app. It is Energy Star rated. It comes with a long 5-year warranty, and it's made in Taiwan. Installation of the MSI EV Premium is relatively straightforward, although I have to admit, a little more complicated than some of the other EV chargers that I install, basically because you actually have to open up the unit in order to mount it to the wall. So let's start this. As I've mentioned in other videos, because I don't do permanent wall mountings here in the State of Charge Garage, because I'm always reviewing equipment, I use a slot wall system. So I'm not going to actually install this with the 2 brackets. That would be a little bit too complicated for me here. I'd have to have 2 different mounting brackets. I don't even know if it would work on my wall. So I'm just going to use the upper one. But what you need to do first is use the template here and install the 2 brackets. As you notice here, I've installed the top bracket here. The bottom bracket is about 10 inches apart, center to center, but you want to use this mounting bracket here, and you can see exactly where you would drill your holes down the center here. Ideally, you want to be along a stud. See if you can use a stud finder or something so that this thing is mounted on the wall securely. This is a very heavy unit. And additionally, there isn't a remote connector holster. The connector gets holstered on the unit. So now you have the weight of the unit and the weight of this thick, heavy cable. So this thing, I wouldn't recommend even using drywall anchors. You really should anchor it into a stud, something strong, because this thing's heavy. So you'd put the top bracket on as you see here, and then the lower bracket here would be installed actually like this here. And what you'd basically do is you hang the unit on the top bracket, and then you open up the front cover by unscrewing 2 screws that are on the bottom. Now there's also 4 additional screws that are left not screwed in when you get the unit. Those are in that little packet. So when you put it back together, not only do you have to screw in the 2 screws on the bottom, but also 2 screws on both sides. This plastic cover here has actually 6 different screws holding it on, which is a little overkill, but that's fine. Probably because they want to maintain that IP55 rating. And this does have a really good thick gasket here, so that's fine. So basically, you'd hang it on the wall. And then with the 2 screws that they give you, they actually give you 4 of these. 2 of them go on the back of the unit. I already installed them, and that's what you hang the unit on. Then you use those additional 2 screws to screw the bottom of the unit onto this bracket, which is going to be on the wall here, through the unit into these 2 screws, and now it's secured to the wall. All right, so I'm going to hang this on the wall now, and then we'll take a look at the wiring. All right, once you have the unit mounted on the wall, it's just a matter of attaching 3 wires inside, but I urge you to get a licensed, qualified electrician to do so. One of the reasons why I've partnered with the Q-Merit network of installers is because I know they do things right. They pull permits, they get it inspected, they torque all the connections to the right torque rating. It's really important when you're using electric vehicle charging equipment because the amount of current that flows through it constantly and for many continuous hours. But the way the wiring is connected is it comes in through this bottom here. Now, the interesting thing is on the MSI unit, it doesn't have a rear entry. Some EV chargers allow you to pull the wires through the rear of the unit. There'll be a knockout in the back so you can connect the wires that way for a cleaner installation. Some don't. The MSI does not allow for rear entry, so you have to pipe your wiring in through the bottom here. It's going to come up through the bottom here, and then you connect the 2 hot wires here, and then the ground goes on this screw here, and that's it. Then you just close up the front, install those 6 screws, and you're good to go. If this was one of the MSI plug-in units with a NEMA 1450, you wouldn't have to do any of this. You just plug it into a NEMA 1450 outlet, but then you're limited to delivering 40 amps or 9.6 kilowatt to your EV. This 60 amp unit can deliver a lot more power. But the only other thing that I found interesting is there's no cable management for this at all. So I'm stuck draping the cable over the unit here and then plugging it into the connector holster on the side. But I did look at a couple other reviews that are on YouTube on this unit here, and they seem to indicate that a little hook was included with this unit. Very rudimentary cable management, basically just a hook that you screw onto the wall to loop the cable around. It was definitely not in my box. And I double checked just a few minutes ago because I was like, maybe I missed this thing. It's only a little metal hook. Nope, it's not in my box. So perhaps my box got mispacked, or maybe MSI isn't including that. In any event, it's not a big deal because honestly, it was not a very good hook. If you're gonna buy this unit here, I'd recommend going on Amazon and buying a better cable management hook with a integrated connector holster. I'm not in love with how this goes on the side anyway, and a lot of people install these units on areas of the wall where there's not a lot of space on both sides, and for that reason, the front mounted connector holster is a better deal, especially if you want to locate it in between 2 garage doors, that little space. I know a lot of people put their chargers in there. You wouldn't be able to put this in there because you'd never be able to holster the connector. Or you could put the unit in there and then buy a remote connector holster separately, but does not come with any type of cable management, which I found a little odd. But I will check with MSI before this review is over. I'll let you know what they said about why there wasn't a hook in my box. All right, well, that's it for installation. Now we get into the fun part of the review, the testing. It's time for our cold weather testing. In this test, I'm going to test how pliable the cable is when it's frozen. I have it in a freezer here. It's been in this freezer for 24 hours at well below 0 degrees Fahrenheit. Should be somewhere around 11 or 12 degrees negative. So it's frozen solid. What we're going to do here is see how well the cable flexes and bends if it's frozen. If you live in a northern state and you had this unit installed outside in the winter, you need to be able to manipulate it when it's very cold. Now, of course, this doesn't apply to everybody. If you live in Southern California, it really doesn't matter how well your cold weather cable performance is. But for a lot of EV owners, it is important, and that's why we do this test. And after I do the pliability test, I'm going to drop the connector while it's still frozen on this concrete floor 5 times just to do our frozen connector drop test. Okay, first let's pull the unit out and see just how cold it is. All right, negative 12.5 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's nice and cold in there. I mentioned earlier how thick this cable is. It's the thickest cable we've ever tested here, so that doesn't bode well. The thickness isn't everything, but the thicker the cables are, the harder they seem to be to manipulate. As you can see, I always wrap the cables up into these small loops, and then I try to stretch them out and see how well they bend. Let's put this thing up on the wall here. Okay, nice and frozen. Now we'll uncoil it. Okay, see how it's kind of acting like a spring? That's necessarily not what you want to see, because that means that it's not going to really want to conform to what you want it to do. And you could see the cable's fighting me. Like, it doesn't want to uncoil and bend well. Let's see if I can make it. You can even hear it kind of cracking a little bit. You might not be able to hear that, but all right, let's see. Now just imagine in the winter, you know, the car's been charging all night, and in the morning you unplug and you want to then coil it back up and holster the connector. See how it's not like floppy, it's retaining that like spring-like position. That's not a good result. Okay. So yeah, this isn't going to do well in our cold weather cable pliability test. It's going to get a low score, as I thought it would, just from my initial reaction when I saw how thick this cable was, and also, you know, just the consistency of the outer jacket. So this is frozen. I wouldn't want to have to deal with this every morning if I had my charger mounted outside in a cold weather area. Now, of course, a lot of people put their chargers in their garage and it doesn't get that cold. But this is an edge case, and we like to test this for everybody. Okay, next is the connector drop test. So I'm actually going to take this off the wall to make it easier for me to drop it. As you can see, the connector is still frozen. There's a little bit of ice forming on the outside of it. We'll drop it 5 times from about waist high, because, you know, if you have a charger with a connector, you're going to drop it from time to time. It happens. So let's see. Two. Oops. I think I heard something break on that second drop. I did. The plastic from one of the pins inside the connector came off. Can you see that in there? So that's going to be a fail on the connector drop test. But let me continue with this. That's 3. Four, 5. Okay. Other than that, it passed. Now, this isn't the end of the world, because I can put this little black piece here back in here, and it'll be fine for the rest of the testing. But it's going to fail the connector drop test because of that also. So the cold weather testing didn't go super well for the MSI. Next up, it's time for our extreme heat test. I've had this heat lamp on the MSI for 2 hours now, maintaining a surface temperature of right around 120 degrees. What do we have here? 116 right now. So for 2 hours, it's been baking at 120 degrees. I'm now going to plug in my Ford F-150 Lightning. The unit is set to deliver its maximum amperage, which, if you remember, is 60 amps. That's a little over 14 kilowatts. Now, my Lightning happens to be one of the few electric vehicles that can take 60 amps on AC charging power. There's not a lot of electric vehicles out there today that can charge at more than 48 amps, but we do have one here that we can test the unit with, delivering its full amps for 2 more hours. I leave the heat lamp on it for an additional 2 hours, charge an electric vehicle for 2 hours at the full amperage, and then we'll see if the unit continues to deliver its maximum current, if it derates, if it shuts off, if it overheats, anything like that. We do this for people that might have their unit installed outdoors in a hot weather climate with the sun directly baking on it. In areas like Arizona, Texas, and some of the southern states, the unit can absolutely get to 120, 130 degrees if it's sitting outside baking in the sun. And some electric vehicle chargers will derate when they overheat. They're designed that way. It's a safety feature, but this is to test if this unit can handle a sustained 120 plus for 4 hours, 2 hours without charging and 2 hours during a charging session. So I'm going to plug in the Lightning now. I'm going to record the full 2 hours to make sure that it continues to deliver the full amperage. Luckily, the MSI has this beautiful display screen, so it's going to show us exactly what it's delivering. I don't have to rely on my vehicle's apps to tell me how much energy the vehicle took in. This is going to tell us how much it did. So we'll check back in 2 hours and see how well the unit did. All right, so it's 2 hours later, and the unit has been sending the full current to my Lightning for 2 full hours with the heat lamp on it. Let's take a look at how hot the unit is now. I mean, this guy is cooking. We're at 167.5 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's baking in there. But it's normal for the units to heat up during charging because the charging process itself, with electricity passing through the unit, heats the units up on their own. And the fact that this was delivering close to 60 amps, it wasn't delivering a full 60 amps. The entire time it was delivering between 55 and 56 amps. But I've noticed that's what it delivers even when there's no heat lamp on it. That's just what the unit delivers, slightly under the 60 amp rating. And plus, I have slightly low voltage here. So instead of a full 240 volts, I was delivering about 225, 226 volts during this charging session. So the vehicle was only charging at a little more than 12 kilowatts. But that's normal for here where I live. I don't get full 240 volts here. I live out in the woods kind of, and long distance from the street. So a little bit of voltage sag with the wires getting to my house. But still 2 hours delivered the full amount of power. It passes the extreme heat test. Next up, it's time for the automatic restart test. This test simulates a power outage. Your electric vehicle is charging, power gets lost, whether it's for an hour or even just a few seconds. The charger is going to power down and shut off, charging will stop. But then power gets restored. You want to make sure that the charger itself doesn't remain in a fault state, that it re-engages the electric vehicle, continues charging it. That way, if this was happening overnight, you wake up in the morning, you want your car to be charged. You don't want it to have stopped charging whenever you had that momentary power outage. Some chargers remain in a fault state until you clear it. So we just want to make sure that this will re-engage the Lightning and continue charging. It's plugged in and charging right now. I'm going to cut the power to simulate a power outage. Okay, power is off. The lights went off. You could probably hear the Lightning clicking as charging stopped. Just wait a few seconds and I'll turn power back on. We'll just make sure that it starts charging the Lightning again. That's good. All right, power is restored. Nothing yet on the unit. Okay, it's starting to light up now. powering up. Initializing. And charging. Okay, started charging. So that did pretty quickly. So the MSI passes the automatic restart test. MSI does have its own app, which I paired my unit to, but you don't have to. They do have true OCPP compliance, and you can actually pair the unit to third-party applications if you'd like. Once you do pair the MSI app, though, you're allowed to do things like set your electricity rate so you know exactly how much it's costing to charge your vehicle. You get individual records of each charging session. You can also use your RFID card, which has to be authenticated in the app. You need to pair it with the unit. You get 2 of those RFID cards. And you can also lower the output amperage of the charger. You can only do that in the app. I prefer when the chargers have a hard limit inside the unit, and no matter what you do in the app, you can't exceed that. That would be the case if you installed it on a circuit that can't deliver the full amperage. And particularly for this unit, that it can deliver up to 60 amps. I think that having the hard limit that you set inside the unit would be appropriate. I think a lot of people aren't going to be installing this on a circuit that can deliver the full amperage. It is a 60 amp capable unit. So with the 80% rule of EV charging for continuous load, this would have to be on the minimum of a 75 amp circuit. Now, I don't even know if they make 75 amp circuit breakers. I've never seen them. So you'd need to have it installed on an 80 amp circuit or a 100 amp circuit. Not a lot of people can spare that. And I think the people that can spare a 100 amp circuit would probably buy an 80 amp charger because most electric vehicles today that are made can only accept 48 amps. The very small use case for a 60 amp charger, in my opinion. The vehicles that can accept more than 48 amps can accept 80 amps because typically that's the jump up. My Ford F-150 Lightning can accept 80 amps. A lot of the new General Motors vehicles can accept 80 amps, but most electric vehicles out there today can only accept 48 amps. So you really don't need that extra power. If your EV has a 48 amp onboard charger, plugging it into a 60 amp EVSE, or we call them chargers, isn't going to make it deliver 60 amps. It's still going to be limited by the vehicle. So I'm not sure the use case of a 60 amp charger. It's always good to have a little bit more amperage if your vehicle can take it, but it's not going to make that much of a difference with overnight charging. And it would cost substantially more for you to install that 80 amp or 100 amp circuit. So and what I'm getting at here is the fact that it doesn't have an internal switch. You can only limit the power output in the app. That could run afoul with some inspectors. I know some inspectors don't like when an app can raise the output above what the circuit can provide. And you can do that with this. Let's say you installed it on a 60 amp circuit and said, well, I'm going to limit the unit to 48 amps, and you slide that bar down to 48 amps. What happens if somebody's playing around with your phone and just slides it back up to 60 amps? Or if the app resets, or there's a glitch in the app and it goes to 60 amps again, all of a sudden now you're overdrawing the circuit. And there are electrical inspectors that won't pass chargers that only limit the output through the app. So that's something to consider. You could have problems with this. And I already had problems with the app. When I first downloaded the app and paired it, it was telling me that I needed to do a firmware update. No matter how many times I tried to push the firmware update through, it wouldn't accept it. This went on for 3 or 4 days. And then I had to go away on a press drive. Actually, it was a Rivian R2 first drive. And so I wasn't home for a couple of days. When I came back, it updated itself. And then it worked. But during the time when it was trying to update, I was having trouble charging the vehicle. And the vehicle was showing that it was charging, and then it wasn't charging. And you could see in the app, no power was being delivered. The app said the vehicle's charging. I'd plug it in, but no power was being delivered. Once that firmware update went through, I haven't had any problems. So, the bulk of this review was done after that, and it's worked perfectly. I've charged multiple electric vehicles on it. I never had that issue that I had before the firmware update went through. But I was going to call the company and say, look, we got to manually push this thing through because I can't review the charger if it's not working, and it's not working now. But then it just fixed itself. So that concerns me about the app stability when the app is controlling the power output. It's not a problem if you install it on a 80 amp circuit and you're going to pull full 60 amps. But if you put this on a 60 amp circuit, lower it down to 48 amps, I don't know if I'd be comfortable with that. Not having a hard limit with a dip switch inside the unit like many electric vehicle chargers have. So I've been using the MSI EV Premium now for over a month. This has been a really long review. I just haven't had time to finish the review. I had a couple of trips scheduled in between and just never finished it up. So I've used it a lot, probably as much, if not more, than any charger that I've used while I'm reviewing it. And I've used it to charge all my electric vehicles, my Equinox, my Bolt EV, my Rivian R1S, and of course my Lightning regularly. And with the Lightning, it reliably delivers close to the 60 amp rating, usually getting somewhere around 56, 57 amps, which is fine. Not uncommon that the units deliver slightly under their maximum rate that's advertised, and it's worked fine. That little plastic pin has held on that I glued on in the connector. Probably won't for long because I could tell it's starting to get loose again, so that's unfortunate. And that shouldn't happen with only 2 drops, and it's going to get penalized for that in the ChargerRater. Now the cable was probably my biggest complaint. It is thick and heavy, as I mentioned, thicker than any other charger I've ever reviewed in here. I've got more than 100 chargers in this garage, and it's not needed. Even on this higher amperage charger, it just simply isn't needed, and it becomes a pain to just drag it in and out. As far as the connector hook, if you remember earlier when I did the unboxing, I mentioned that there was no type of cable management that came with it, and I'm just draping it over the unit here, which is not ideal. I reached out to MSI and they said it should have come in the box. It didn't. I double checked, I triple checked. There was no hook in the box, and it kind of is a very weak cable management that is provided anyway. It's just a little hook. You can get something better on Amazon if you buy one of these to manage and hold the cable. So there's that. It just didn't come in the box like it's supposed to. Everything else worked fine. I used the RFID cards to begin the session. And one thing to note on those, if you swipe it to begin a session, it gives you 2 minutes, and there's a countdown on the screen. If you don't plug the vehicle in 2 minutes, you've got to activate it again. That's pretty good. If you swipe the card and then maybe forget to plug in or something, somebody else can't come by and grab the connector and charge, so it automatically shuts off after 2 minutes. I used the scheduling feature. It works. The scheduling feature worked as advertised. Everything seemed to work fine on it. So, the unit works fine. It's a nice, robust unit design. This thing is very well made. It's, as I mentioned earlier, it's heavy. It's got a very good enclosure IP rating. So that they built what seems to be a very robust unit. But, this is a first go for MSI. MSI is not a small company. It's a very big company. They're very big in the gaming industry. They make high-performance laptops, motherboards, a whole bunch of components for computers, high performance components. So this would be in their wheelhouse. It's not a bad first attempt, but there's definitely room for improvement here. They need to put a thinner cable on here, one that's more flexible. They need to perhaps source a different connector. Even though I like that connector's feel, it can't break with only 2 drops from waist high. It just can't. So, of course, I could have just gotten one connector that was bad, but I'm more inclined to think that it's just not a high quality connector. And this is a premium unit. This costs $649. That's much more than the competitive chargers that this is going up against. So it should do everything very well. And it is lacking on some of the premium smart charger features. It doesn't do intelligent load management. It can't power share between multiple units. You can't set it up to charge exclusively from excess solar generation if you have a solar array, which is what many of the high quality premium EV chargers can do these days. So good first attempt for MSI. Room for improvement, and hopefully they do make some improvements. If they do, it'll be a nice solid unit. With that said, the only thing we have left over now is the ratings. So let's go to the ChargerRater. Okay, for the MSI EV Premium 60 amp charger, we'll start off with the cost and value category. It gets no points on cost. It gets 5 points for warranty. This thing comes standard with a 5-year warranty. That's excellent and better than the industry average of 3 years. And for value, I'm going to give it a -1 point because I think it's slightly below average. It's an expensive unit. It doesn't deliver on all the features that units in that price category typically do. So it finishes up the cost and value category with 19 points. For power and construction, I'm going to give it 1 point for maximum charging power. And I'm giving it the 1 point because the 60 amps is basically the same as 64 amps. And the point of getting that 1 extra point would be for chargers that are greater than 50 amps. I've never come across a 60 amp charger, so I didn't accommodate for that on the ChargerRater, but I'm going to give it a point there. It deserves an extra point. For adjustable power, it gets 1 point because you can only adjust the power in the app. It gets 2 points for cable length. For connector, I'm only giving it 1 point out of 5. I could have given it 0, but I do like the way it feels, and I think it kind of feels like a well-made connector, but obviously it isn't because it broke on only the second drop. For connector holster, I'm giving it 2 points. That side-mounted connector holster is okay at best. Temperature sensor and plug, it doesn't get any points, doesn't lose any points for that because this is a hardwired unit. But I am going to follow this up with my ChargerRater score for the 40 amp plug-in unit, and it'll come into play there. So it finishes up the power and construction category with 22 points. For testing, it gets 2 points for extreme cold, 2 out of 5. Did not do well in the extreme cold weather test. Could have actually got 1. I give it the benefit of the doubt there, and it got 2 points. For the extreme heat test, it gets no points because it functioned fine. You don't get points for that. You only lose points. For automatic restart, it gets a point because it passed. Safety certified, no points because it is safety certified. You only lose points in that category also. And for Energy Star certified, it gets a point because it is Energy Star rated. In the testing category, it finishes up with 19 points. For intelligence, smart charger with app. It is a smart charger with an app, but I'm only giving it 2 out of 5 points there. The MSI app doesn't have a ton of information. It does give you all your previous charging history, but to be honest with you, it should have some more things. I don't like that it doesn't display the current kilowatt draw. There's other information that is, I think, lacking, and overall, it's just a basic app, so I'm giving it 2 points. For PowerShare capable, no points because it's not PowerShare capable. No points for intelligent load management. No points for solar charging. For access control, it gets 3 points because you could do it through the app and also with the 2 supplied RFID cards. 3 points there. And for OCP standardization, it is getting 3 points because you can direct the charger to third-party app and not use the MSI app. So it finishes up the intelligence category with 23 points. And that gives the MSI EV Premium 60 amp a grand total of 83 points. And when you convert that to a 5-star rating, the MSI EV Premium gets 4.15 stars out of 5. Not the best score, certainly not the worst score. But again, that is for the 60 amp hardwired MSI EV Premium. MSI also sells a plug-in version of this same unit that can deliver up to 40 amps. So let's take a look at what the ChargerRater would look like for that unit. For cost, it's going to lose 2 points because the plug-in 40 amp unit actually cost $50 more than the 60 amp hardwired unit, I guess because you're paying for the plug. So it loses 2 points there. For warranty, it's got the same great 5-year warranty, 5 points. For value, I'm going to give it the same below average score as I did for the 60 amp version. It loses a point there. Finishes up the cost and value category with 17 points. For power and construction, loses 1 point for being able to deliver a maximum of 40 amps. It gets 1 point for adjustable power because you can adjust the power through the app. Cable length, 2 points. Connector, same connector, 1 point. Connector holster, 2. temperature sensor and plug. It does not have a temperature sensor in the name of 1450 plug, so it loses 3 points there and finishes up the power and construction category with 17 points. For testing, everything here is going to be the same as the 60 amp version. 2 points for extreme cold, no points for extreme heat, 1 point for automatic restart, no points for safety certified, 1 point for Energy Star certified, finishes up the testing category with 19 points. And for intelligence, again, it's going to be the same as the 60 amp version. 2 points for smart charger, no points for power share, no points for intelligent load management, no points for solar charging, 3 points for access control, 3 points for OCPP standardization, ends up with 23 points in the intelligence category for a total of 76 points. And when I convert that to a 5-star rating, the MSI EV Premium 40 amp plug-in unit gets 3.8 stars out of 5. Not a great score, one of the lower scores that we've ever given for a 40 amp plug-in unit. All right, well, that's pretty much it for the review. The only thing left is to talk about my hits and misses for the MSI EV Premium. We'll start off with the hits. The enclosure itself seems to be constructed extremely well, and it has a great weatherproof IP rating. It has a bright 7-inch LED display screen, and it has a 5-year warranty. That tells us that the manufacturer is confident that this unit is built well and will last long. And for the misses, I have to start off with the connector breaking on only my second drop. It's a good thing this has a 5-year warranty. Also, it has no advanced smart charging features like intelligent load management and power sharing capabilities. And finally, the thick, heavy cable becomes a little cumbersome to use. Quite honestly, I really wouldn't want to be dragging this back and forth every day as I charge and plug my EV. All right, and that's all I have here today for the full review of the MSI EV Premium 60 amp electric vehicle charger. If you're interested in purchasing it, I will drop a link in the description of this video to click through and buy it. And if this is your first time here at State of Charge, please don't forget, click that subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any upcoming electric vehicle news and reviews. And as always, thanks for watching.